Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. This one is going to be pretty short because the stories in this anthology are really short, and that is Whispers of a Shadow and Starlight by TA Hernandez. I have reviewed her work before, and I loved it. It was one of the only indie books I've ever gotten my husband to read, so when she offered me this microfiction anthology, I was super jazzed about it, not the least of which because I could read it really quickly. So microfiction, if you don't know what that is a very, very tiny story, whereas a short story can be up to several pages long. Microfiction usually has a set word count of anywhere between 50 to 100 words. So we're talking very tiny. And most of the time when you're working with that tiny amount of words, there's kind of a setup, almost like a joke in a certain way, but not always for the comedic effect, wherein you'll have a setup of a premise, usually relying on people's preconceived notions, and then a turn on that premise in the last sentence or so. Probably one of my favorites is the ones where the wife suddenly pulls a gun out on the cheating husband, showing that she knew all along. I don't know why that's such a common theme in microfiction, but it is, and I love it. So as a result, even though there are 130 stories in this collection, it reads very quickly. Now, the name, Whispers of Shadow and Starlight, is not just to follow modern YA titling conventions, but actually references the fact that these stories tend to fall on the opposite ends of the wholesome to scary spectrum. They're either scary and tragic and really, really sad and dark, or they are light and happy and fluffy and cute. Like, there's no in between. And that's kind of to be expected. It's not like you can fit a lot of nuance into 50 words. And a lot of these are also speculative in nature. They tend to be more sci-fi or fantasy. There are some that you could count as contemporary or thriller, give or take. But again, with so few words, there's not a lot you can work with beyond just the premise and the twist on it. So some of these actually did read almost like poetry in a way, dealing with big concepts and more vague concepts, which was, I didn't dislike it, but it's not what I'm here for when I'm reading a microfiction collection. Obviously, I loved the sci-fi ones overall the most. There were actually a couple that you could kind of string together to form a larger narrative if you wanted to, because there were multiple that dealt with being lost in space. There were multiple that dealt with this kind of alien invasion story. So if you wanted to, you could kind of like line them all up and get a greater idea of this alien invasion or this person that is adrift in the cosmos, which I really liked. But honestly, I think one of my like favorite singular stories out of this that I would want to see is the story of Mac and his two dads. Now, you don't actually know in the actual microfiction, the 50 words, that that Mac is a kind of winged elven child, or B, that his adoptive parents are two men, or at least two masculine presenting people, I guess you should say. But in between some of the stories are these pieces of artwork. They could either be giving a little bit more context, like Mac and his two gay dads, and how you find out Mac is actually a winged elven child, judging by the fact that the picture has them both having wings and pointed ears. I don't really know exactly what his species is supposed to be. But there are other pieces that are literally just meant to be like symbolic, artistic representations of the story that just preceded them, which I really appreciated, not the least of which because some of these stories do need maybe a hint of extra context. Now, for the most part, I did understand what each story was trying to get at. Maybe I had to reread it once just to make sure that that's the twist that was coming. Some of them are so incredibly sad. Some of them do deal with darker topics, specifically things like child abuse. I know comes up in a couple of them, but nothing too dark, too overt. Again, you don't have a lot of time in 50 words to get too graphic, just the knowledge that this bad thing happened. But overall, I really enjoyed this one. I still definitely want to see Mac's story in a kind of, it's not really magic realism, is it? but similar to her previous work with an alternate history Prohibition era, I would love to see that same kind of magic in the real world vibes with that story. But there are also some other fun concepts that it deals with later on. A lot of things about, like, getting chips implanted and becoming a slightly different person and all of that. Admittedly, maybe it's not plagiarism. You can't exactly plagiarize most sci-fi ideas, but a lot of cases when I'm reading these kind of short story collections for speculative work, I consider them a success basically when I get inspired. Oh, this cool little concept, I could do something with that. Again, I don't necessarily consider that plagiarism, only because two writers are not going to write the same story idea in the same way. You could give two writers the exact same idea and they would go in totally different ways with it. And also the author, again, flat out mentions that some of these probably could be turned into bigger stories, maybe whole novels, without much issue. Regardless, I gave this collection 5 stars. Very nice. If you're interested, it is such a quick read. I think I read the entire thing in under an hour. Granted, I have a pretty fast reading speed, but I can't imagine that even 130 pages with only 50 words on each page, I feel like most people would be able to finish this really quickly. But anyway, really happy with this one. Really happy to see what the author does next. I am still closed, technically. Admittedly, I might have accepted a few new reviews, but now that I see in December on the horizon, and I'm looking forward to one day being able to do that big giant in December recommendations list every year. I'm trying to pick up doing more of my review books. I'm hopefully going to jump into doing another review book right after I finish filming this. But it's just going to continue to be iffy. My headspace is just going to continue to suck for a while. But with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.